session. Okay, so now let's start our first lecture. First of all, I will give you a brief introduction of the music technology, of how that changed the music industry using the two videos. Okay, these are two well-made YouTube videos, introduce you to the music technologies from phonograph to vinyl, tapes, and digital computers. Okay. So let me play these.
What happens when you take one of the most streamed songs of all time, say Drake's One Dance, and record it onto the oldest format of recorded music, a wax cylinder? Okay, stop. Not great. But fast forward to today, and a lot has changed. We no longer really own music. We just stream it. Streaming is almost entirely responsible for getting the industry back on track. But the question is now, can streaming take it back to its heyday after fundamentally changing the way we consume it? Maybe. But first, let's look at how we got here. So, back to that phonograph. This was the start of it all.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
Thomas Edison's invention meant that for the first time, people could listen to music from the comfort of their homes, and it could also be shared and sold. As the phonograph's popularity grew, a few enterprising Americans came together to form what is now known today as Columbia Records. Over the next 5 decades, the phonograph took different forms, from this cylinder shape to flat discs, until finally being replaced by In 1948, Columbia Records introduced the long play, allowing for multiple songs on one record. Vinyl remained the dominant recording format for most of the 20th century.
Go, Johnny, go, go! Everybody, let's roll!
The ring of fire.
And as rock and roll, blues, and country kicked off, sales boomed and albums sold out. But by the late 50s, new technology would again rock the industry. When first introduced, the RCA magnetic tape wasn't a game changer. But being able to record music on a smaller device for greater portability inspired a series of innovations. Adoption by car makers ensured a quick rise in the tape's popularity. And by the late 60s, most cars offered 8-track players. For the first time, driving down the interstate and listening to, say, the Beatles was possible. Road trips got a whole lot more exciting. But it would be Sony that changed the game with the iconic, yes. With the Walkman, listeners could take music with them whenever and wherever. Around the same time, MTV launched, giving record labels an opportunity to market their music. For artists, that meant it wasn't just about the song anymore, but the ability to offer a whole artistic package, and that became a big focus for icons like Madonna and Michael Jackson. But with the rise of the digital era came the unraveling of the cassette tape. Thanks to booming CD sales, the music industry partied like it was, 1999. Profits peaked that year, with $14.6 billion in sales in the US alone. There was Nirvana and Tupac, the Spice Girls, Oasis, Backstreet Boys, Britney, Mariah, and Selena. Unfortunately, You can only party like it's 1999 for so long. Software like Napster paved the way for a new era of piracy. CD sales plummeted as more and more people logged on. Free music didn't sit well with the music industry, and they fought long and expensive legal battles, eventually seeing some sites shut down. But the damage had already been done. Sharing music over the internet was here to stay.
I've got an iPod here.
And true, with the introduction of the iPod and MP3 players, the industry did see a boost from digital downloads. But it wasn't enough to make up for the dwindling physical format sales, and artists were forced to tour more to bring in the dough. Meanwhile, streaming was just getting started. Some companies introduced subscription models with limited music libraries, while others, like Pandora, operated as internet radio stations with ads. But the breakthrough came in 2011. Swedish startup Spotify managed to do what the others could not: license a vast library of music. Instead of buying and owning songs and albums, we started listening to ads or paying monthly fees in exchange for access to, essentially, all the music in the world. Over the following years, there was an explosion of services. Artists and labels now count on these services for the bulk of their profits from recorded music, while many argue that artists are not being paid enough. Although streaming is responsible for huge revenue growth in the industry, tech companies aren't yet making money from it, and it's still not clear how they will, as they continue to prioritize growth over profits. Plus, if history is any clue, it won't be long before new technology shakes everything up again.
Okay, so yeah, it's a brief introduction to the how technology shapes and changes music industry over time. And to comment on this last sentence, right? If history is any clue, it won't be long before
New technology
shakes everything up again. So for this, okay, obviously, new technologies is coming up. Okay. Right? Like the AI. So just, comment to this. And I want to refer to this paper now. If you want to know what's the next or what's possible be the new technology that changed the time, right? So every time a new technology came up, it changed the whole industry, like how the companies benefits, how the industry profit from people buy music, right? Like from phonograph to CD to vinyl to tapes to CD, and now it's streaming and downloads. Every time the technological innovation or development changes how people interact with the world, right? And also how the industry benefits. So now it's more about AI. Everything is AI, artificial intelligence, especially with the emergence of large language models, right? ChatGPT and Google's PLM and Gemini. And AI music also the next trend probably for music industry. And now it's already has this kind of indication here because of the AI is so powerful that it interferes the profits of some industry, and there are some suitcases that the record labels are suing to leading AI startups and are reportedly exploring a licensing deal with YouTube because they're training this music model of AI music model using the data, and now the AI can generate music that's competent with the human, right? Human writer, human composers, and there are some problems. So what do you think, right? What do you think would be the next technological innovation or technological change in the music industry? Okay. So just commenting on this, And let's continue with this list. Here is another video on the introduction of those musical storage formats, vinyl, tape, and compact disc. Let's watch this.
Record players were way ahead of their time. Everyone knows that the sound comes from the grooves, but how on earth can a groove in a plastic frisbee generate the sweet ear nectar that is Yellow Submarine? It's because sound is just vibration. Say you were to speak into a big horn that had a stretched out balloon at the end. That stretched out balloon is going to vibrate along when you speak into said horn. And that vibration is the same vibration your eardrum makes to let you hear sound. So say you then taped a pencil that would vibrate with the balloon. If I put a piece of paper against the pencil, you'd see something like this, useless scribbles. Now if I move the piece of paper at a constant pace, you'd see this, slightly less useless scribbles. Congratulations, you just recorded your voice. Good job. That scribble on your piece of paper is the sound waves or vibration that you were making by speaking into the horn. But there's no way to play it back. It's literally just a piece of paper. Only what if it wasn't? What if instead of making a 2D line, we make a 3D line? And that's what these guys did back in the 1800s. The gramophone. Say Lady Gaga sings into a big horn that would focus and direct the sound onto a diaphragm, which is essentially just a fancy stretched out balloon from before. The diaphragm would vibrate, and attached to the diaphragm would be a stylus or needle that would cut these vibrations into a wax record, creating a 3D line with bumps and valleys. If you take that wax record and put it through a chemical bath, you'll have a metal record. You can then use that metal record as a stamp on old plastic frisbees. Now we have a record, but the question still stands. How does it play music? You actually literally just do everything backwards. First, start spinning the disc at the same speed you spun the wax record when recording. Then, drop the needle into the groove. The bumps and valleys are going to cause that needle to make the exact same vibrations as the needle that recorded the original sound. And just like how you record the original sound, the needle is connected to a diaphragm, and that diaphragm is going to make the exact same vibration as the original recording. And vibration is sound. So all we need to do is amplify that vibration by adding a comically big horn, and you'll get the exact same sound made by Lady Gaga. But modern records don't use big horns, so how does that work? Well, modern record players are a little bit more digital. Instead of a horn, it's a speaker, and instead of a flimsy balloon, it's a copper coil vibrating in between two magnets. As the copper coil moves between the two magnets, it makes electricity that goes to a speaker, creating sound. But it's the 80s, and only losers use vinyl anymore. The cassette tape. Now, what sort of sorcery is used to put Michael Jackson into this measly piece of black Scotch tape? Magnets. The answer is magnets. In fact, the actual process is kind of just a futuristic magnetic version of a vinyl. Step 1. Record some music. Say you're Michael Jackson. As Michael Jackson, you aren't going to sing into some big horn. You're going to sing into a microphone. But how can a microphone capture your hee-hees and ha-has? Well, let's get it open. Inside of the microphone, you'll find a diaphragm that vibrates when you speak into it, just like the balloon. The diaphragm is either connected to a copper coil, kind of like the record player where the sound vibrates the coil, sending different strengths of electricity, or the diaphragm is connected to a capacitor, which is basically just a fancy plate. As you speak, the diaphragm moves, and this vibration changes the distance, causing a change in stored energy, resulting again in different strengths of electricity. Step 2. Magnets. So now we have electricity. How does that help? Well, it's easier to think of the electricity as the pencil in our original example, and that makes the magnetic tape the paper. The recording head is the point of contact. The different strengths of electricity make changes to the magnetic fields on the tape's surface. This creates a little pattern of magnetization that almost exactly replicates the original sound wave. But how do we read said magnetization? Well, just like before, it's the same process, but backwards. Put your tape into a boombox, and there will be a playback head there too. As the tape passes over the playback head, the changes in the magnetic field on the tape make an electric signal. This is the same electric signal that was made when recording. The electricity is sent to a speaker, which has a diaphragm just like the microphone, creating a big old vibration. And thus, you hear the sweet harmony that is Michael Jackson. But nobody listens to Michael Jackson, because he is just so 10 years ago. Welcome to the 90s. Now, instead of a frisbee or scotch tape, we use a fat, glorified ring. To record sound onto this fat ring, we use a microphone that works the same way as before, except this time we take that electricity and convert it into ones and zeros that represent the original sound wave. And that's a lot of words, so how the freak do we do that? By looking at the voltage. For example, if the voltage is this high, we give it a 1. If it's this low, we give it a 0. Now, using a teeny laser, we put these ones and zeros on a disc, where pit represents a 1, and an untouched land represents a 0, but these pits and lands are so small, the disc seems smooth. Now, if you put this disc into your crusty 1992 Honda Accord, it's going to read it, also with a laser. This laser bounces off the CD. If there's a pit, it bounces a bit differently and writes down a 1. If there's a land, it bounces the same and writes down a 0. But how do these 1s and 0s magically become music? Again, same thing but backwards. First, we use a digital to analog converter, but you can just call them DAC. DAC will generate a certain amount of electricity depending on whether it reads a 1 or 0. This creates the same electric stream that was in the microphone when originally recording. And just like before, the electric stream is sent to a speaker, which has a diaphragm that vibrates depending on how much electricity it receives, creating weak knees, heavy arms, and mom spaghetti. And all that information is actually not free. It's going to cost you 1 subscribe, and I'm just going to flip this around. It's going to ask you a couple questions.
Okay, so this is a pretty quick introduction to the working principles of all those things. And we will decompose those concepts gradually and dive into those details later on. And in this video, the author used many analogy, to make it easier for you to understand the concept, which is not precise, but it's fun, and it's a good introduction for you into the field, into the working principles of those technologies, and we will unfold those concepts in our course. Okay, so before talking about all those technologies, I will start with music notations first, because before the phonograph was created, people still they still create music. There is the church, right? The gospel music, and there are the chant, right? So there are like thousands of years of history of music before the phonograph was invented in the 1870s. So, and the symbolic music is always, a major part of music representation and music understanding. So before talking about the technologies based on the audios, right? So you can see all those technologies are based on the recording of the sound and audio. But for music, actually, we are dealing more with these discrete symbols. And when we talk about music, the pitch, right? The piano, when you play the notes, we are talking more about symbolic representations. So before talking about the sound waves and audios, I want to introduce you to symbolic music. So the symbolic music, the oldest sheet music here. So before music notation, music was taught by rote saying, a method of memorizing through repetition. Right? So before this handwritten notation was created, music was just expressed or memorized by rote saying. Means I sing a melody and you will repeat after me, and everything, all the melodies are just stored in in your brain, right? In the people's memory. There's no way to write it down or to communicate with people, using this written format before the music notations were invented. So the earliest music notation for Gregorian chant is called neumes. The neumes, it looks like this, appeared around 850 AD, which is greatly developed and popularized by Guido of Arezzo. So think about the phonograph, right? The phonograph was invented in 1870. Yeah, if I remember correctly, there's 1,000 years, of the ruling of music notations in the music representation. The standard staff notation had a massive influence on the development of Western musical notation and practice. Okay? So all the music scores you read, if you play the Western classical music, piano, violin, etc., even you play the modern, play the guitar or the jazz music, many people still refer to this printed or handwritten music notations. Here is a video introducing you to the origin and development of sheet music. Let's watch it.
In music, notation is defined as the graphic representation of musical parameters, such as pitch, duration, and volume, in a musical font developed for this purpose. It allows us to document in writing any piece of music that has been created, and means that we don't have to rely on handing it down by just singing or playing. The pin rollers and discs of a barrel organ or music box can also be seen as a way to document a melody. But apart from that, until the invention of the phonograph, notation was the only way to record music that had been heard, other than through memory. There are many indications that a kind of notation already existed in ancient Egypt since the 3rd millennium BC, and other cultures also tried to preserve music in written form. The first fully developed, and now completely deciphered, notation is that of the Greeks, who, according to different sources, first did so either in the 7th century BC or around 250 BC. This form of notation used letters, possibly named after the strings of the guitar, for the pitch, and marked the tone duration with symbols written above it. It is handed down in many fragments. However, there is only one composition completely preserved in this way. It is found on an inscription on the Seikilos epitaph, which was carved into a gravestone in the 2nd century BC near Ephesus. In the middle of the 9th century, European monasteries developed a new way of notating the Gregorian chant, which used neumes as symbols that were written over the text. They represented the hovering movements of the choir or the singer. Thus, a single neume stood for a certain melodic phrase. However, different graphic symbols were used in different countries and monasteries. The oldest source of this notation is found in the Musica Disciplina from around 850 AD. The second great use of notation is to express new melodies and other musical ideas exclusively in writing. Thanks to this, individuals can create very large and very complex works. In modern times, a very different kind of notation has developed, namely the new music. Unusual sound effects can only be described with new and sometimes unusual characters. Thus, notation always adapts to the current time and music, and is subject to continuous further development.
Okay. It's a brief history on the development of music notations from the oldest ancient Egypt to the European standard notations. So here is another introduction, which focuses on the neumes or the Western standard of Gregorian chant. Let's watch this.
Music notation has come a long way since its beginning well over 1,000 years ago when it was first used to recall the sound of a melody. You see, up until this point, there was no formal way to write down and remember specific pitches or rhythms. While human beings have written ideas, messages, and stories down for thousands of years, some of the first attempts at formally writing music down began as early as 850 as a way to assist with rote singing. With rote singing, in order for a group of individuals to perform a piece of music, one person would first sing a musical line, and then a small group would sing back that same phrase. This was a fairly easy way to learn a melody, but before music notation, performers would have to rely on their memory, which limited the creation of new music. This form of singing was used for most sacred chants that were sung as part of the Catholic Mass. Now, some of the earliest music notation was called neumes, which looked like little dashes that were used to illustrate certain syllables of text. But it was Guido of Arezzo, a creative music theorist and monk from Italy, who suggested an arrangement of lines and spaces similar to what we have today. Guido used a red line to show where the note F would be, and a line of yellow ink for the note C. This is similar to our modern notation, which uses a bass clef, or F clef, to show where an F is, and a treble clef, or G clef, which illustrates where a G would appear. The main difference between Guido's music notation and the musical staff that we know and love today is that Guido's arrangement only contained 4 lines. And at the time, there was no way to indicate how long each note should be performed. This meant that early vocal music was very legato, or smooth and connected, because the exact rhythm of these phrases was open to the interpretation of the performers. However, over time, these little neumes became more precise, and the 4 lines later evolved into our 5-line staff that we use today. Guido also invented solfege, which again was slightly different than what we have today. Guido used the syllables ut, re, mi, fa, sol, and la, which we now know as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and ti, which was added a little bit later. This groundbreaking approach to music notation enabled performers to associate syllables of solfege with different pitches, enabling vocalists to more easily learn and perform melodies without having to rely on rote singing. This breakthrough in music notation may not sound like much to us today, but this clever thinking opened the door for composers to begin to write down, edit, and remember pieces of music, which led to an explosion of musical creativity in the following centuries.
Okay. So there is a more complete history on the development of Western notations, especially the beginning of neumes and where the music score we see nowadays came from. It's invented by Guido of Arezzo. Okay. So because of the emergence of music notation, there is a music industry, right? The first music industry is a print industry, is the printing, because especially after the printing technology was invented, people know that we can not only write down, handwritten those scores, we can make copies of that by printing, and we can spread that out worldwide. So the first music industry is based on printing, and this is to print symbolic music. But because of the limitation of technology at that time, it's not that easy to print music at first, especially at the beginning. So this is a video that give you the example like how people print the the notes, the musical notes at first. So it's a pretty complicated process. It's not like what we think now. You make some plates and you just make stamps and you just have thousands of copies. At first, it's not like that. So let's watch this video, see music printing and notation, where it begins.
From the middle of the 15th century onwards, the intellectual and cultural life of the West was revolutionized by the development of systems for printing multiple copies of word text. This revolution was made possible by adapting existing technologies and by technological innovations. Not only the printing press, but also the production of suitable paper and inks. Success with printing words and images was quickly followed by attempts to adapt the process for printing music. This is a page from the earliest known book of printed musical pieces, dating from the 1470s. With music, as with words, the task for the printer was to reproduce notational conventions that had been developed in handwritten forms. The problem was that in music, the notational forms were much more complex than for simple word texts. In this sequence, we're going to look at some of the technological problems and solutions that were specific to the printing of music. Not surprisingly, early printed music related to the most valued repertory of previously written music, the liturgical music of the church. In the beginning, it had been reproduced by monks copying by hand, and music manuscripts were often the opportunity for elaborate decorative artwork. But some of the most striking features of the originals, such as the use of 2 or more colours and prominent capital letters, also served a practical function for the performance of the music. Early music printing attempted to reproduce these features. There were elaborate woodcuts for the capital letters, and double impression printing was used, in which the lines were printed first in one colour or shade, and then the notes and words were added in another. Sometimes the notes even ended up on the right lines. There was a natural pressure to simplify this process, and once multiple colours were abandoned, the obvious thing to do was to give every musical note a separate piece of type, just as every alphabetical letter had a piece. But while letters are strung out in a series along one line, music has to accommodate notes located on different lines and spaces to denote the pitches, and notes of different shapes to denote the durations. There are also subtleties of spacing to consider to avoid the notes becoming crowded. And when you had to fit words or syllables under the notes as well, the situation got more complicated still. Here at the Plantin Moretus Museum in Antwerp, we have some preserved examples of 16th century music type, and we can see how the printed music was literally put together. For each note, you would need a separate piece of type. Here's one with the note head on the middle line of the stave. If you wanted to build an ascending scale, you would go from there to one with a piece of type on the next space, and then on the next line up, and the next space, and on the top line. You could save the number of pieces of type by turning it the other way up, and so now we have the ascending scale of all the notes from the bottom line up to the middle line. You'll notice that in this note the stem goes from the middle of the head, but music written in manuscript usually has the stems going to the sides of the note heads, left or right, whichever the composer or copyist preferred. Music printing eventually followed this convention, but in order to make the note invertible, it standardized the pattern. And in fact, it then gradually changed the way people wrote manuscript music, so that the down stem went to the left-hand side of the head and the up stem to the right-hand side. As well as a piece of type for each note, you needed a piece of type for each musical symbol, and for bar lines, and for pieces of empty stave. It becomes more complicated if you want to put one note above another, or if you want to put a rest into one of the spaces between the stave lines. In this case, instead of having a single piece of type, you have to build it up with a separate piece of type for each of the 5 stave lines. You need quite a lot of pieces of type to make up a complete line of music. But in this system, you can put the notes on every line or space, and you can put pieces of stave line in where you need them. The disadvantage is that it shows up little gaps between the various pieces of type, and therefore the stave lines are not as solid as they would be if you drew them as a single line. You can see how all of this fits together in one of the most ambitious music books printed by Christopher Plantin. Here in the library there's a copy of that book. It's a collection of masses composed by Georges de la Hella and published in 1578. It's a very big book, and it has to be because it shows the parts for the 6 singers laid out on one double opening of pages. The start of each part is marked by the large capital letters. Remember also that the size of the type would have to be large because 6 people would be singing from this book at the same time. It's not like just one person reading a book by themselves. Here at the Plantin Museum, they've made a reconstruction of the complete set of type, or form, for one of the parts. It would have come off the press like this. And if we look at the type, it appears to us as upside down. If you look at the form the other way round, so that the words are underneath the notes, you have to read the music from right to left. Here you can see the woodcut for the capital F and the pieces of type for the clefs at the start of each line. Here you can see how the separate pieces of type have made the stave line broken and uneven. And where the printer had to put in a rest, he had to make this up from the separate pieces of type. You can see the gaps between them falling into the spaces between the stave lines. The dot after this note also had to be made out of 5 separate pieces of stave line. The sharp sign here is on a piece of type that covers 3 of the lines, so it had to be made up with an extra piece of type for the line at the top and another piece of type for the line at the bottom. Although the letterpress style of music printing was rather fiddly to set up, it could still look quite attractive if it was based on type designed by such masters of the craft as Grandjean and Fournier. It proved inadequate, though, as new styles of music developed. Separate notes to each syllable in vocal music quite suited the letterpress style, but successions of fast notes for violin or harpsichord didn't suit it so well. For these, a different sort of technology was needed.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of information in this video, especially how they use the little pieces of types. They call types is the wooden cards, right? And to compose them together, combinations, different combinations to form different compositions, different scores, and to print that. This is how, you know, everything begins for the printing of music. I think the most interesting thing here in this video that they mentioned is how the standard music notations nowadays was developed, right? Because if you read the music score, okay, maybe I should open this. This is the music score. Or yeah, I will add this to the software later on. This is also a very good notational music software. And it's also free. Okay, you can download this and open any music score encoded in MIDI or music MXL in music score. So here you can see that in a standard notation, if you read the music scores, the staff music, you can see the beam, right? The beam, up beam is on the right, and the down beam is on the left. So if you ever wonder, right, for me, I never wonder. It's because you know, when I learned piano when I was a kid, all the, you know, stuff, the music scores, the stuff music looks like this. So I never questioned like why the upper beam is on the right and the lower beam is on the left until I watched this video. Now you know this how the printing, right? How the printing technology influence how people perceive the the real object in the world, because of the printing. You can because if you flip this part, right, this note upside down, then you can save the numbers of the little pieces, right? Because if you can reuse the up beam and the downward beams, if they have different directions, and this was preserved. Although nowadays the printing industry no longer use these little pieces of wooden cuts, and combining them together is too sophisticated, but this tradition was preserved in all the music scores, and it becomes the standard music notation. Okay, so I think this is the most impressive part of this video, I would say, and help me to gain some knowledge. And here is the later on, when the printing technology also developed, how people print music scores faster and easier. And let's see this one.
We get into the 20th century, and metal engraving is king for a long time. Metal plates that would have been actually carved would be made of copper or zinc or pewter. And you can see that in the picture on the left, there's actually a scoring tool that has 5 burrs on it that is then with a ruler.
Right. And now, because the technology developed, people use the metal engraving. So you have a plate, you just cut those lines there, and you use the ink, right, to print those music scores, which is much faster, easier, and you don't need to manipulate so many small pieces to combine them together. Yeah, so everything becomes simpler when the technology develops.
Scraped across the plate, and it scores the 5 lines. In fact, that is probably, I believe, where the term score comes from, is that he's scoring the plate. And then fixed symbols like clefs and note heads, things that were uniform and could be repeated, were hammered into the plate. If there was a mistake, you'd have to hammer it back out, and in the end, these burrs, these little rasps or whatever, had to be cleaned off, and the plate had to be polished so that it could ink could be applied and it could be used. So metal engraving is actually, when we use the term that music is engraved, it comes from this actual practice, and really an art. This is an example of a score or a piece of music that would have been put through that process. This is Alexander Artunian's Trumpet Concerto. We'll visit this music a little bit later.
Okay. So I just pick a small part of this video to show you how the printing technology develops, from the wooden cuts to the metal engraving. But this video is of nearly 20 minutes, and if you're interested, you can watch the full video for a brief history of music notation. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So after watching all those videos, I hope you have a basic brief impression on music notations. Now I'm going to talk about the music notations on the paper, right? The staff music, how people print it, how people write it down. But now, because we are all using computers and we listen to music on computers, we even visualize the staff music, right? Using the computer softwares like this. But how this file is created, how music notations are encoded as computer language. And this is a question I want to talk about, is the symbolic music representation in computers. And it actually goes a long way. It's not that easy to represent music using digital formats. If you know that computers has the binary language, right, 0 and 1. So it's important to find a way to encode music, and not only the notes, but also the kind of notations here, like, some maybe highlights include some, text. And if there is lyrics, like Gregorian chant always have lyrics, you need a way to input the text and align the text with the score. And also the key signature, time signature, and those different, notations people invent, repetitive and dynamic marks, right? And tempo, all those things. How do you encode that into the computer and make a computer readable file to play or to create the score or even to play the music, right? Actually, we can not only visual the score, like printed music, we can even listen to the music using this software. So let me play this. Right, so you can see the phrase actually repeats because there is a repetition like marks. But you need the computer to understand that, right? To understand how it should play the music and how it should write down, or how it should just present the music as the actual score. This is a really well presented score here because it's encoded in this music XML format, which we will talk about is the IEEE 1599 standard. Okay, it's a standard way of, because people are exploring this way, and there are many inventions of how we represent music in computers, but we need some standards to unify the representation, right? So that it's like the compile, how you compile files using different systems. So in order to have a common format that all the different softwares, different systems can all read in those files and make it interpretable and readable, we need some standard format to encode symbolic music. Okay, so this is in the music MX format, but let me show you another format. So this is the same composition, okay, the same song called Maple Leaf Rag, but this one is in MIDI. Okay. It's a little bit slow, but we will dive into those things more in our next lecture, okay? And using different softwares to show you, show you how different softwares present those music and the difference between those softwares, how they deal with the music information from the files, and how they kind of distort the information. Okay, so for example, here this is the music MXL. Oh, okay, why it's a sim file? Sorry. Okay, should be. Oh, this one is the MIDI. Okay, so here is the MXL music MX file, and this is the MIDI. Okay, MID is the MIDI format. So you can see the MIDI format here is more like chaotic than this one, right? It's not well aligned, well structured like the music here. But if we listen to this, these two compositions should sound the same. You can hear my computer sound, right? I just want to make sure that I'm not doing something doesn't make sense. Okay, I think you can. Okay, thank you. Okay, sounds good. If there are any questions, just let me know through chat, or unmute yourself. So let me continue with this. So actually these two files sounds the same in this software MuseScore, but the presentation, I would say, the printing or the stuff music looks quite different. And here is obviously it follows the standard way of how the composers or musicians write down the score. But here it only preserves the basic sound or the basic note information, and it doesn't have the hiders, doesn't have text, and the tempo is 100. I believe this tempo is tested by the software itself. Okay, and there is no, there is time signature and key signature, but sometimes it doesn't have. It's different. Okay, and all those notes, it doesn't have this well formatted. Up the beam can be up and down. It's not like standard here. Standardized here, and here you can see these things look just more chaotic and not that readable as this one. I would say, like, how do you feel about this, right? But it just sounds the same. It's that different file formats. This is MIDI because MIDI actually discarded many information from the original one, and the music MXL is more standard way. It's encompass it includes all the information in the score, and we will get into these more details later on. If we don't have time today, I will do it on Wednesday. Okay, so here you can see those things, and I will also upload I will upload those files to the module, and you can open them by yourself. Okay, not only MuseScore, I use MuseScore more, but there's also other music notational softwares online you can find. Maybe you use other softwares. There are always different subtle differences between those notational softwares. Okay. So, but MuseScore is a good one. It's free. It's like many people use this, so it's easy to debug. And if you don't know anything, if you search online, you can get the answer immediately. And this is what I like about the common software. Okay. So so there are different symbolic music representations in computers. Here are some common ones, I would say, but there are more. There are more. We are not covering everything here. We are only giving you some examples so that you can have a basic sense or feeling of how the symbolic music are encoded in computers. So the first is ABC notation. ABC notation is the simplest, I would say, and the simplest and not really widely applied. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Actually, I see the files encoded in ABC when I, like a few years ago, when I deal with the files. But nowadays, actually, nearly everything is in MIDI, and the music XML is like more expensive ways. Yeah, and unless you have a good human labor and time and to encode those files, MIDI is more convenient, and it's easier to manipulate and doesn't require so many subtleties there. We'll get to this later on, but let me get you into ABC notation first. Okay, so this is a Wikipedia. ABC notation is a shorthand form of musical notation for computers. Well, actually, it uses the letter notation, the text, to represent music. So if you read stuff music, or if you learned Western classical music, you should know how people use the letters to represent the different notes, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. It's like C, D, E. This is C, D, E, F, J, A, B, C. So this is where the ABC, right? The name come from, because we can use numbers. If we talk about the MIDI format, people actually use numbers to represent notes. Should have it here. Yes, this one. So this C4, right? C4 means this is where the location is, because this the scales are repeating. So the upper scale is C5, the lower scale is C3. But this is the ABC notation, means you use this letter, the letters to represent notes. And you can also use numbers. So these numbers are the standard MIDI numbers. So C4 is 60, and this, the scale is 12 tune. So C sharp is 61, and you add 1 to all those, there's 12 tunes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? In a scale, in a chromatic scale. And for every half tone, you're increasing 1 number. So MIDI is more like numerical based, no notational format, and you can do these numerical manipulations in MIDI easily. But if you use ABC notation, unless you transform it to the numbers, it's very easy. You cannot do the numerical, right? Because we know the digital computers is based on numbers 0 and 1. So the numerical format is definitely have like more, give us more convenience to deal with the files. And there are also like frequencies. It was a pitch, right? Like do, re, mi, fa. So these are different pitches, different frequencies. And those pitches are given by the frequency number or the fundamental frequency of those things, of these pitches. And this bandwidth is some filter related. We are going to talk about this here for now. But whatever, this is the ABC format. Okay, you use letters to represent the different notes. But the problem is that if you use ABC, but how do you represent different scales, right? So like what we just saw before, like you can use C4, before you can add some number there to indicate where the scale is at, right, on the keyboard. But actually ABC, they don't really use this. You use something called Helmholtz pitch notation. I would say this is prior to this kind of more advanced or more convenient notation using numbers like C4, C3, C5 here. Before this, people use something not really convenient. Does it use this comma and upper letter, lower letter, and double dot, third dot, and something like that. I mean, it's pretty easy to make mistakes, right? If you think about this notation, either you use computer or using not really handwritten, but even if you print that, it's difficult really to tell this difference. So if you miss 1 dot, this will become totally different notes, right? If you miss the comma, if you just misinterpreted or miswritten the upper letter and lower letters, those things are just pretty easy to mess up, I would say. But this is some music notation that people use before, and there are some folk songs. I would say there are like some data sets encoded in ABC notation, especially for easier, I would say easier monophonic, folk song. ABC notation still like works. It's not by the choice, but it still works. So it's based on this character set, ASCII character set, which is the standard way of how computer encodes the text. Okay, if you know, how these different letters, how alphabet is represented by the digit numbers and how it's compiled by the computers. So whatever. So for ABC notation, it's much easier. Sorry. Oh, it should be here. You can read through the history, right? Include folk and traditional Western European tunes. So these easy tunes, the single line melody, is still okay to represent using ABC notation. But if it's chords, if it's more complicated compositions, this would be disaster if you adopt this kind of notation, I guess. So for simple tunes or melodies, ABC notation is still works. So this is an example of ABC notation. Okay, this is how it interprets. So maybe we can listen to this first. It's called the Legacy Jig. Okay, and also one drawback of ABC notation, if you read this, you can see that it can only give you this integer division or integer multiple of the durations. So it can only represent like quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th note. So you cannot have this flexible duration, not really flexible. So it's very much limited because it uses these numbers, right? D2 means it's a quarter note, and this GFG, sorry. So this is GFG, right? So each letter represents a quarter note, right? An eighth note. Sorry. Yeah, it should be eighth note, right? Am I right? Sorry. So whatever, GFG is here, GFG, and BAB, this is BAB, right? If you refer to the standard stuff, notation to read the music score. And this is still GFJ, but it's on a higher scale. And so this uses the lowercase letters. JAB is JAB. And now it drops down to this original scale. Is the upper letter here. GFG, BAB here, BAB. And here, when you encounter this note that is double the duration or double the length of the previous note, you use 2 to indicate the duration, right? D to A. A is still an eighth note, and AFD. So you can see it can only represent this very simple tune, and this tune sounds like very mechanical. It only has eighth notes and quarter notes. Although we have many critics now, but we cannot deny that ABC notation is really a standard way of and quite popular way of encoding the tunes, musical tunes, and music scores into the computers. Although it has many limitations on this representation, but it works, and many people, it's a standardized way of music writing on computers. So this is the ABC notation I want to talk about. Okay. What this is. And this is use LilyPond. LilyPond is another notational software. Okay, so I use MuseScore, but LilyPond, I think it should be earlier. Probably I downloaded this before, but not really used LilyPond. I don't know if it's still like updating or not. But if you use LilyPond, or if you prefer this software more, you can also use that. You do this, okay? So this is another choice of music notational software. Okay, so for piano roll, this is a visualization of piano roll. Okay, so here is the piano, the keys, the black and white keys, and you can see here, right? So this denotes the time involvement. Okay, the X exercise is the time. So it means you are pressing this note for 2 grids, and then you change this note and this note. So this is a piano roll. Means when you play the piano, for how long you are pressing this key, it will show as the durations, and this piano roll is evolved over time. Actually, Ableton Live uses this piano roll to represent the symbolic music, and many other music applications also. It's a very convenient way of representing, and especially if you don't quantize those grids. But so here you can see all those notes, right? The start and ends on this grid. Okay, maybe I should do this. They all start and end on this grid lines. But if you don't quantize that, if you make it flexible, it can actually show the precise duration of how long you press the key, right? So it's more precise. I would say more precise representation of music, because you're not restricted by whether it's a quarter note or half note or eighth note, 16th note, but it can be flexible durations, flexible times. So it can be a little bit longer than a quarter note or a little bit shorter than a half note, something like that. So it's a more flexible time of variation will gives you more micro timing expressivity of music, which is what we really want, or what we really like when we listen to the music, right? When we listen to the live performance, it's not that mechanical if it's played by a real human, because you don't have this precise quantization mechanism, right? That's saying, oh, you can only press this key for 2 quarter notes. Maybe if one note is half a second, it's only 1 second, you cannot be longer or shorter. So whatever. For piano roll, so this is music transformer. Let me get back to this later on. Okay, we don't have time today. And this MIDI format is what I will talk about. What I will teach using my own notebooks. And music XML. If you're interested in these standardized music notations, I would recommend you to read this thing. So this is also in the readings in the first module. Here is the folder. So you can read through these things, and we'll talk about this more in our next lecture. Okay, the IEEE 15159 standard. How they encode, find a standard way to encode music into this XML file. And this is actually more complicated. It's encodes many more surplus information that we don't really need when we listen to music. But this is a way of giving a standard way of that can encode all the music, all kinds of music. So this is the purpose. The purpose is that this standard notation can encode audio, performance, notational, structural, logic, general, everything music related. Either audio, even the video, even the picture, even the text, everything can be encoded in this single file. So this is the purpose. It's kind of encompassing, but also it incorporates much more surplus information other than the music information, the core music information we need. So if you read through the music XML file, it's difficult to keep focused. But if you use MIDI, in the MIDI, everything is music related. The MIDI keeps all the music information in the file, and with the minimum of other supplies information. That's why I personally prefer using MIDI for data processing, and even for training or music generation, all those tasks. Because sometimes you just won't be focused, right? If you read a paper of 10 pages, only 1 page information is of use, this will cause too much time for you to processing the file, right? So whatever. So in our next lecture, I will give you some more examples on those MIDI and piano roll and those softwares. So if you like to, you can download those software and do it with me. Some hands-on experience. You can gain some hands-on experience here, just by your interest. And okay, so our lecture ends today. If you have any questions, you can ask. I can stay here longer. That's fine. If not, I'll see you on Wednesday. Okay. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for the lecture.
Thank you.
See you on Wednesday.
See you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
You too.